So I went to a wedding once where the father of the groom got up to give a little speech at the reception. It's not unheard of, fairly normal. But he said something that sparked some controversy among the guests. The groom's dad shared with the crowd that a few years earlier he had challenged both of his sons to aim to get married by the time they turned 23 years old. Nice. I love the gasps. You're already with me. Here at his son's wedding, the dad was praising his son for finding an incredible wife, passionate in her pursuit of Jesus, strong in her convictions and her character. The groom at this wedding was 20 years old. At a time when young people are waiting longer and longer to get married. 28 years old on average. It's probably safe to say that this dad's advice to his son is at least part of how this groom ended up getting married at 20. And then add on to that, the dad's other son, younger son, kind of appears to be on the same track. Soon to be engaged, already talking marriage with a serious girlfriend. And there seems to be no doubt that this dad's challenge has really made a difference in the choices that these boys are making with their lives. And so I'm curious, what do you think of this dad's challenge to his sons? Do you like it? Are you unsure about it? Or do you think it's a bad parenting move? Can you give me a thumbs up if you think this dad's challenge is a good thing? Put your thumb to the side if you're not sure how you think about it, and give me a thumbs down if you disagree with this challenge and you think it's dumb. I want participation. Okay, I see thumbs down. I see sideways, down, 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 up, down, down, up. Okay, I see another up. Very few ups. I see two thumbs ups in the back, and some daughters actively pulling the arms down. Thumbs down. I didn't say, do you plan to adopt this as your own practice? So don't worry, Lauren. Here's what I'm curious, real quick. Anybody willing to share with us why you voted the way you did? Carson threw his hand up real quick. So Carson.
10 years away.
So what did you do? Which way did you go? You said no because it's only 10 years away.
Yeah.
Fair. Jasmine, what did you say? Which direction? Oh, sideways. Okay, so it could be good because you should get married soon, but not too soon, because something could happen if you get married too soon. I think that's what I heard Jasmine say. Anybody else willing to share why you put your thumb up or thumb down? Russ, which way did you go and then why? Down.
I was down and I thought, boy, if that dad is trying to control that in their lives, what else is he trying to do?
Okay, so for Russ, it feels like a controlling thing. And so it's curious about what other control is dad trying to seize? Okay, thanks, Russ. Candace.
I was in the middle, and I think it depends on the type of child it is.
Okay, so sideways depends on the type of child it is. Great. Somebody have a thumbs up willing to tell us why, defend? Rosemary? Oh, 2 thumbs down. I've had a couple thumbs down. I want to get a thumbs up, though. So, Brian, Claudia's pointing at you. So we had a thumb sideways and a thumb up. So, in the same family.
I got married at 23, and I couldn't have asked for a better partner.
Oh. Well played. Well. Okay. Oh, we did get a double thumbs up. So.
Okay.
Okay.
A little bit with this of, getting
Okay, so couple guys who got married right around that age and feel pretty happy about your decisions. So,
About your decision.
well, I mean, I was even younger, and I feel fantastic. I want to bring this actually a little closer to home, because I'll tell you who this dad and his sons are. The wedding that I went to was actually just this last weekend. It was the wedding. It was the wedding that Jane and Kate and I were at in Arizona, and the dad is Jane's brother, Dan, and the sons. I didn't tell you who it was because I didn't want that to shape any of your votes. And the sons are our nephews, Jake and Ty. The first time I ever met Jake's mom, Angela, she had just thrown up in the driveway because she was newly pregnant with Jake. And so actually my entire relationship with Jane's family so far tracks with Jake's existence. And this will probably sound somewhat biased, them being family and all, but truly Jake and his brother Ty are two of the most mature, solid young men that I've ever known. And I've worked with teenagers for a long time. But these two, they know who they are, and they live it. Both went to public high school, and at a time when Christians can sometimes be quick to attack public schools, worry about the corrupting influence of schools, Jake and Ty went through high school with the influence going the other way. In addition to working hard at school, working hard at sports, they both have their own real and personal relationships with Jesus. And to share Jesus with their classmates, they take friends to Young Life, and they led friends to the Lord in high school, and they're leaders among their peers. And all of this because of the fruit of the Spirit in their lives. And standing around Jake at his wedding were these other solid, mature Christian young men. And I had this thought last weekend. If Becca told us at 20 years old that she was ready to get married, what I know of young men today, I'd be pretty nervous. Unless she was marrying a guy that was anything like my nephews and this group of young men around them. Yeah, don't marry your cousin. I said like, come on. But thanks for re-emphasizing that. Let me explain why Dan challenged his boys to marry by 23. There is this long developing cultural phenomenon that you may have heard of. It's called, sociologists refer to it as the lengthening of adolescence. Sociologists and those who study human development, they've noticed patterns over decades of research that young adults, especially young men, but it's everyone, are taking longer and longer to show the markers of traditional adulthood. Boys' brains, their emotional intelligence, their relational maturity, and their sense of place in the world are both significantly behind women and the men their age from the past. Boys are just taking longer to grow up. And one of the reasons for this, according to the people who study this stuff, is that boys are growing up in a low challenge, no purpose culture. The larger cultural message is that just take as long as you need to grow up. Your 20s are for fun and for friends and for finding yourself. There's no need to rush into adult life and adult responsibilities. All of that can wait. Or so our society says. And young men have been taking this message to heart for decades. And so now we actually see Boys are falling behind in school so that now girls are significantly outperforming them. Girls are getting higher grades, and they're getting more advanced degrees than boys, and they're getting more of the jobs that require advanced degrees than boys. For a variety of reasons, more and more men, especially young men, are leaving the job market altogether at a time when women continue to enter it at higher percentages than the past. And we live at a moment where very few young men see fatherhood as something to aspire to, as a good and noble calling. Dads are mocked relentlessly in media, and being a dad just isn't seen as a worthy calling. My brother-in-law, Dan, has been a teacher for 2 decades, and so he has seen all of this firsthand with all of the young men that he has been teaching. And his instinct with his sons has been to father them with a high challenge and big purpose. And let me just say, right, there are environments that are high challenge and low love or low care. This is not the environment that these boys are growing up in. They have high challenge and high love. But they're given this high challenge, this big purpose. Become men. Don't waste your lives playing around as boys. There's a time for boyhood, for childish things, and there's a time to grow up. Being a kid is often about passively enjoying or experiencing the world that others create for you. And so it's an easy path, it's comfortable. But becoming an adult is about creating the world for others. It's about taking responsibility for someone other than yourself. Responsibility for a family, for your neighborhood, for the world. And to Dan, this is what he is challenging his boys to, the gift of responsibility. How many of you hear the gift of responsibility and you're like, yeah, responsibility is such a gift? I see some faces going, I don't know, what? Gift? What? Seriously, this is one of the very first gifts that God gives us, human beings, in the very beginning. If you have a Bible out, turn with me to the very first page, Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. You'll recognize this. Then God said, "Let us make humanity in our own image to resemble us, so that they may take charge of the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, the livestock, all the earth, and all the crawling things on earth." God created humanity in God's own image. In the divine image, God created them. Male and female, God created them. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fertile and multiply. Fill the earth and master it. Take charge of the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, and everything crawling on the ground." Just notice a couple phrases there. Humans were made to take charge. To take charge of the fish, the birds, the livestock, all the crawling things. And I love this sort of catch-all statement in there, all the earth, everything. So wait, which parts of the earth are not under the charge of humans? None of it, right? It all belongs to the care of human beings, just like us. And you might ask, why? Just find God made us, and he gave us this work to do in the very beginning. God gave us responsibility for it all. Responsibility is at the very heart of what it means to be human, to live a full life. But I need to clarify, right? Because sometimes we use the word responsible to mean something like someone who does what's required of them, right? So we see a person as responsible if they always show up for work or if they always get their work done and on time, right? A responsible student does their homework. A responsible kid does their chores. This isn't the kind of responsibility the Bible's talking about, though, right? Because you can be a responsible student who turns in every assignment complete and on time, but you never actually learn anything. You never actually take responsibility for your learning. And so you never go above and beyond what is required to actually learn what is in front of you. And you can be a responsible kid in your family who keeps a tidy room and makes your bed, but who never takes responsibility for any of the household work that isn't on your chores list that your parent gave you, right? You can see the difference. Like, I'm not talking about being responsible. I'm talking about God making us responsible. God giving you responsibility for the world that he made. Where you, like you, as in each one of us, carry the very life of something in your hands, where you hold the weight in such a way that you feel it on you. That this is part of God's design. Now, I'm probably going to kill this sermon with the death of 1,000 qualifications. But I want to clarify one more thing, right? Because when I say that God gives us responsibility, like he doesn't like hand the work over to us, wipe his hands clean and say, okay, get to work. I'll be back later to check on it. Like, God's not absent. He doesn't give up his responsibility when he shares responsibility with us. Our God puts his own yoke, like one that he continues to carry, on us to share with him. To be fully human is to accept God's invitation to take charge of God's world. That's not like for the elected leaders out there, the powerful people. That's an invitation for every single human being. And not only are we to take charge, but we're to take charge in a particular way, because we don't get to just take charge however we want, whatever is most natural to our personalities. We take charge as the image, as the representatives of God. Which means that we are supposed to look like God and we're supposed to act like God, so that those who are in our charge, they feel cared for by God when they have been cared for by us, right? So that when we exert any leadership, those who are in our care should have an immediate picture of what God is like because they've come into contact with us. This is what my brother-in-law Dan is raising his sons to be in the world. Men who take charge of the earth and care for it as our Father in heaven does. Dan is simply calling his boys to be fully human, to be whole, to be complete, and to do that sooner than later. Thanks, Jasmine. Thank you. Because, right, think about it this way. If being made in the image of God means taking charge, taking responsibility for God's world, then to put that off, right? Like to waste a decade of your life just playing around, like it is a life wasted. If humans were made to share God's responsibility for the world, like it doesn't matter how much searching you do for your identity, how much time you spend trying to find yourself. Like, until you take on some responsibility for someone or for some place, right? Like, you will not experience a core part of the joy that you were made to experience, because you're missing out on the work that God made you to do. The joy of living as an image bearer of God. Dan has called his sons to a life of purpose, God's purpose. And he's offered them a high challenge to be the image bearers that they were made to be. So why not add one more qualification to the sermon? Dan's sons, thanks Candace, are not all young men, right? It depends on the young men. Both Jesus and Paul make clear that some men will be called to a life of singleness, and some men will be prevented from getting married. And so Dan's challenge is by no means a standard or universal rule for all young men or young adults. Jane was surprised after the wedding when we started talking about this that I appreciated Dan's challenge. And she asked me if I would challenge our girls to marry by 23. And I said, of course not. Our girls are not his boys. To be an image bearer, right? To take charge of the world does not require marriage, but it does require responsibility. For our girls, I want to challenge them to take on their God-given responsibility and enter into it fully, but also in ways that are appropriate to them and to where they're at in life and to our culture and all the things. And for some young men, the goal of getting married is just the right challenge to help them grow, to help them break free of some of our cultural limitations, but to help them grow into the fullness of their image-bearing humanity for some young men. And I think you can see this in my nephew, Jake. Jake didn't wait until marriage to start taking responsibility. He didn't get married so that he could start being more responsible. But back in high school, he was already taking responsibility for others. He took it on himself to become the kind of young man who could marry someone and who could be trusted with the life of another person. For example, Jake knew the difference that Jesus made in his life, and he wanted others to experience that joy. And so Jake shared his faith with his classmates, and he invited students to Young Life, and he became a leader who then helped actually shape Young Life for his friends, because he wanted others to know Jesus and be transformed by him. But here's the difference in Jake, right? He didn't expect to just sit around and hope that God would just save his classmates apart from him doing the stuff that God made him to do. Jake, along with his group of Christian friends, they took responsibility for actually sharing the gospel with others. They took responsibility for living together, living in such a way that they would be attractive to others in their school. Jake and his friends, they knew God and they knew what God was like, and they let God work through them so that others might see in them their Father in heaven. And they did that on purpose. Which brings me to us. Just as your heavenly Father is complete in showing love to everyone, so also you must be complete. This is just another way to say you were made in God's image. You were made to look like him, to live like him, and to take charge with him. High challenge, massive purpose. You were made for so much more than what we often settle for. I want to offer you what feels like a hard truth. I already told you that sociologists describe in young men this lengthening of adolescence, this delay, this often refusal to grow up. People who study the church in the United States, they see the same pattern among not just young Christians, but among American Christians. And not just as people who aren't becoming sort of fully functioning adults in the world, but as followers of Jesus. The average American Christian is pretty comfortable attending church if it is enjoyable or entertaining. But the average American Christian takes very little responsibility for their own ongoing personal growth, for the growth of their families, for the spiritual growth of other Christians, or for the salvation of their neighbors. All of these things are seen by the average Christian in America as the things the super Christians do. Those who are really sold out. The average American Christian is described by researchers as a passive consumer of religious goods and services who sees the main goal of their faith as being a nice person. The question hangs in the air is like, what are we aiming for if that's who we're becoming? You've probably heard this saying before. It's a bit of a cliche, but like if you aim for nothing, you're sure to hit it. But Jesus offers us something to aim for, a high challenge. We are to be complete in showing love to everyone. And the bar is our Father in heaven. But you probably feel this, like love to everyone can feel kind of ambiguous, right? And I don't know about you, but like it's easy to get overwhelmed by the magnitude of everyone. Like that's so many people. Humans in the very beginning are called to take charge of all the earth, the whole earth. But then God selects two humans, the man and the woman, Adam and Eve, and they are given a single garden. We are called to love everyone. We are called to love everyone as our Father in heaven does. But me, right? You are called to love your neighbor. That includes your Christian neighbor and also your non-Christian neighbor. And we find in Jesus this clear invitation to take responsibility for our neighbors and for our neighborhoods, the places where God has put us, the places where we live. That we have been invited to take responsibility to grow up in Christ, to become mature in our love, so that our love looks like our Father's love. And we're told that this is where true life is. That in those places where we find ourselves dissatisfied with all of the stuff we're chasing after, it's often because this is what we were made for. But we often settle for so much less. And we can passively hang out and let other people plan our church life for us. And we can choose to not obey Jesus because he asks us to do things that are hard or uncomfortable. And we pat ourselves on the back for showing up and doing the bare minimum. But yes, Jesus is calling us to more. And we've heard this again and again in the Sermon on the Mount. Be complete. Be whole. Grow up. Take responsibility. Don't just passively love the people who make their way in your life because they're there and so you have to. Imitate God. And what is our God like? He takes on flesh and he moves into the neighborhood. He pursues us. He moves toward his enemies. And then we're invited to do the same, to show up for them, to learn our neighbors' names, to pray for them, to care for them, to show our neighbors what God is like. We are invited to take responsibility for our neighbors in our neighborhood as God has taken responsibility for us and our neighborhood. High challenge, big purpose. You are loved so much.